Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Dive with the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, or RICI for short. We are a grassroots nonprofit made of Christians and Jews working to combat Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, educate about Israel, and promote our shared Judeo-Christian and Western values. This podcast is a bold exploration of the issues shaping Israel, America, Rhode Island, and the future of Western civilization. I'm your host, Maria Friedman, Executive Director of RICI, and I'm hoping this podcast can bring clarity to complex topics so that you have the knowledge and confidence to engage in informed discussions. So today, I'm really pleased to welcome our special guest, Willis Goldsmith. He is a proud Jewish Brown alum from the class of 1969. He's also the proud parent of a Brown alum from the class of 99, and he has been following events related to anti-Semitism and Jew hatred on the Brown University campus since August of 2021. He really is following this issue closely, so I consider him sort of a subject matter expert, and so I'm pleased to have him on. Thank you for coming, Willis.
My pleasure, Maria.
Thank you. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and how you're connected to Brown, and also what led you to follow this issue of anti-Semitism so closely at Brown.
Sure. Well, thank you again for the opportunity to do this. So, as you noted, I'm a Brown graduate class of 1969, and our son was a graduate of the class of 1999. Brown, for me, was a transformative experience. I loved every minute of my 4 years there. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. Neither of my parents had gone to college. So I was the first person in my immediate family who went to college. As I said, it was transformative for me. And as I said, I loved every minute of my 4 years there, as did I believe, and actually I'm quite confident that my son did as well. So I was a supporter of Brown and a strong supporter of Brown for many, many years, decades, really. That support took the form of contributions. It took the form of participation in various events. I was one of the class marshals for my 25th reunion. I was a supporter of the Brown basketball team in many different ways. But in the early summer of 2021, I was shocked to see an article in the Middle East Forum entitled Brown U Professor to Head Terrorist U. I was really taken aback by the headline. I think I quoted it exactly correctly. And I read the article. And the article was about a professor by the name of Bishara Dumani, who not only had been named head of Birzeit University in Israel's West Bank, but that leave that Brown gave him was for 2 years, and it involved his being able to, or rather him being able to return to Brown as the holder of an endowed chair in the Center for Middle East Studies. I found that shocking when I looked into Birzeit and I looked into Dumani's background.
Wow, that is really scary. And for people who don't know, can you tell us a little bit more about Birzeit University in the West Bank? How is it connected to Hamas? And also, how else is Dumani, I guess, infecting I would say, the Center for Middle East Studies and Brown at large with his anti-Israel beliefs?
Well, Dumani was hired by Brown in 2012 or 13. That escaped my view entirely. And I think the view of most people who followed events at Brown. Dumani was hired to promote a senator that would focus on Palestinian studies. And he did that. He did that by bringing to Brown speakers who advocated for the pro-Palestinian narrative. He was also very clever in that he got into the Center for Middle East Studies, both as outside speakers and as participating faculty, a number of Jewish professors who were very far left and were very happy to take the anti-Zionist perspective, which they did. Um, he had ties to Birzeit University long before he served as president. He brought to Brown, for example, certain professors who had been, and I think some still remain, professors at Birzeit. Birzeit is in Israel's West Bank. It is, I think, fair to describe it as a Hamas stronghold. By that I mean, while there are certain courses that make it look like a normal university, it is in fact the home of a huge number of Hamas supporters, the largest club, if you will, at Birzeit is a club that is a student group that is dominated by Hamas, and Hamas supporters dominate student elections at Hamas. The line, for example, that Hamas took after the October 7th atrocities was predictably that of supporting Hamas, that this was just a form of resistance, and they made their sentiments on that issue very clear. Interestingly, Dumani was supposed to give a presentation on his tenure at Birzeit shortly after October 7th. He had spent his 2 years as president, and while there did absolutely nothing to tone down any of the rhetoric that was prevalent on campus. But that presentation, which I think was scheduled for October 13th or 14th, something like that, 2023, was thankfully canceled. So being the head of Birzeit University, as I've written, would be akin to having a Brown professor being the head of KKK University and then come back to Brown as a professor. And indeed, Dumani not only is a professor, but he holds an endowed chair at Brown.
It's absolutely sickening. How is Brown allowing this? Have they done anything to stop this?
Well, that's a good question, and I've been trying for a long time, since August of 2021, in now I think around 100 posts, to get across various points to address that very issue. The response that I have gotten both from Brown President Christina Paxson and various deans to whom I have written outside of the posts to which they all are sent is that while issues in the Middle East are complex, we believe in freedom of speech, academic freedom, as do I. And my position has always been and remains that you can have anybody you want speak at the university, but it can not be solely one narrative, and it cannot go entirely unchallenged, which is basically what's happened at Brown. So using the cover of, as I've written, even the Jews are on our side, Brown has allowed all manner of, in some cases, absolutely horrible human beings to come in as outside speaker, in particular, for example, Francesca Albanese, who is a fraud in more ways than I could possibly recount, including in her position at the UN, another organization that is corrupt and fraudulent. But the number of speakers who have been brought to campus to speak on the Israeli side or the Zionist side, if you will, is absolutely minuscule in comparison to those who have been brought by the Center for Middle East Studies and Dumani and others.
Right. Yeah, it's really a shame that it's so unbalanced and it's skewing towards a extremely anti-Israel narrative. That's also what I've seen. And my organization, RICI, has also made several attempts to try and bring more pro-Israel speakers to counteract that, but it's fallen on deaf ears, unfortunately, at Brown. So uh, tell us more about, the anti-Israel, anti-American content that some of these professors are sharing at Brown. How are they doing that? And again, why isn't the university doing more? Do they have any current efforts underway, or is it just lip service?
Well, in the main, and in summary, if you will, the narrative that the Center for Middle East Studies, much of the Brown faculty, which supports the boycott, divest, sanction movement, for example, track the usual, by now, boring one of uh, white oppression, of Jews being on stolen land in Israel, and the movement of Zionism as a function of both of white supremacy, both and of Jews having stolen land to be there. There is no recognition of any material degree of the extent to which Jews have a 4 or 5 thousand year history with that very land. Of course, that sentiment has been inculcated into the student body, which resulted in the now very well known encampments on campus supporting basically supporting Hamas. They would say we're just engaging in free speech. We're just supporting anti-Zionism, which is different from anti-Semitism, which, as so many have written of late, and not even just of late, but in recent years, is absolutely untrue. So that atmosphere has existed on the Brown campus for many, many years. That's not to say that every Brown student buys into that stuff, but enough do to make it very prominent. The Brown Daily Herald, for example, which I have referred to as the Providence Bureau of Al Jazeera, has not, in the almost 5 years that I've been following this, had a thing to say that would support any pro-Israel position. In fact, it seems to me, I don't have any empiric evidence to prove this, but they seek out Jewish students who are anti-Zionist slash anti-Semitic to just mouth the Dumani view.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because Ricky recently had a pro Iranian people rally at Brown University, well, right near it on Thayer Street, and some Brown Daily Herald students came up and interviewed myself and my board president, and they did all these recordings, and they never published anything. So I do feel that they are also skewed, and I was surprised that they didn't want to share what we had to say. I mean, we were directly calling out the Brown students as being hypocritical, right? Because they say they stand for human rights and they're these social justice warriors, but they were silent when 40,000 plus people were being slaughtered by the Islamic regime in Iran. So I do feel that it is an echo chamber. And I just want to reiterate one of your previous points too, which is so important for people to really realize is that professors like Dumani and other anti-Israel, I would argue even anti-West professors, they are framing Israel as these white colonizers, right? And if we can't crack that lie, we've lost people because in this generation, in this day and age, people want to reject colonialism so bad. It's the cool thing to do. And it couldn't be further from the truth. We know that, of course, Israel is the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. We are indigenous to that land. And we absolutely have not colonized anyone. In fact, it's, the Muslims who have colonized so many countries, right? I think there's over 55 Arab countries in the world. So it's completely backwards, and it's really a perverted way of viewing the world. But that is how that is what we're up against right now, and it's a big organized force. So, can you tell us more about? I know there was a Title IX investigation last year at Brown. What was that investigation? Was it adequate? Were there appropriate consequences? What was this all about? And maybe just refresh our memory of what was the purpose of the investigation and how did Brown's Jewish leadership play a role in that investigation?
Sure, if I may, before getting to that, let me go back to something that you just said because it's important to underscore the colonization point. Yes, that is a key argument that these people make. It is without foundation. Absolutely, there was colonization throughout not just the Arab Muslim world, but throughout the world for decades and decades and decades, millennia upon millennia. That's just a part of history that these people are unwilling to accept. The idea that somehow Israel is unique in their view as a colonizer is frankly absurd. But that is a key part of their narrative. That and the idea that Israel is an apartheid state. You mentioned 55 Muslim states. They are the apartheid states. Israel is a vibrant, multi-ethnic, multiracial democracy. Virtually all of the Muslim states, I think without exception, are the real apartheid states. Those are the states where there is no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, no freedom for LGBTQ plus people, no rights by and large for women. And it's in fact only in the last, I can't remember how many years, 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years maybe, that women in Saudi Arabia have been allowed to drive. So the idea that Israel is the white supremacist oppressor of the oppressed, colonizing entity completely turns history and facts on their head. So yes, there was, as you asked, there was a Title IX investigation. The U.S. Department of Education, through their Office of Civil Rights, did an investigation at Brown. There were extensive resources put into it by the government. There was a series of interviews of various people. There were a series of anti-Semitic incidents on campus, including even at Hillel, that were very well documented, even documented by the Brown Daily Herald of all places. And all of that, in my view, I was a lawyer in private practice for 45 years and did a lot of investigations and did a lot of trials and argued a lot of appeals. That Title IX investigation was totally torpedoed by Hillel and Chabad.
And for
And
those that don't know, I just want to interject and say that Hillel is basically the center for Jewish life on campus, right? So they'll have Shabbat dinners and other programming for Jewish students to enjoy, speakers. It's also a safe space to just hang out. And then Chabad is, I guess, a little bit more of a religious Jewish outreach group that is also right next to the Hillel. So many of the Jewish students on campus frequent both of these facilities, to be with other Jews, hang out.
right, but as you pointed out, you've attempted to meet with Hillel on multiple occasions and have gotten no response. I did see one of your emails to Rabbi Bolton at Hillel with an impressive list of possible speakers. And the response that he very promptly gave was, in effect, don't call us, we'll call you. So Hillel has been an abject failure in dealing with anti-Semitism on the Brown campus. But the reason I say that they and Chabad torpedoed the government's Title IX investigation was because of a letter that was sent on, incredibly enough, Chabad stationery that was entitled, and I have it in front of me now, a statement from leaders of the Brown Corporation and Brown University Jewish community leaders. It's a fairly short letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but the net of it was that you had Hillel and Chabad, notwithstanding multiple incidents of anti-Semitism on campus, multiple examples that clearly were unlawful having taken place on campus. You had Hillel and Chabad basically saying that that Brown was a place of joy and an incredibly safe space for Jews.
And I'm just also pulling this up here on the screen while you're summarizing it for us.
Right. Yes, that is the letter, and it seems to me that Hillel's focus has been basically entirely statistical. How many people come to Shabbat dinners? How many people go to services? How many people do this, that, and the other thing? How many people eat kosher food? All of that's fine, but none of that addresses the issue of anti-Semitism on the Brown campus.
And this
Now,
is,
you,
I just want to pause for a second. This is so important because, I personally have some relationships with some Jewish students at Brown. Some of them are involved with the Brown Students for Israel student group. And I have heard time and time again, how fearful many of these students have been to wear their Jewish identity, how they've had to hide it. I mean, this is not also just not happening at Brown, it's happening at universities across the country, but especially at Brown, when I've heard anywhere between 20 and 25% of students at Brown are Jewish. So this is an extremely important issue. And what you're highlighting, I think, is that a lot of the student voice and student experience regarding anti-Semitism is missing in this letter.
yeah, I think it was that you're absolutely right. And let me go back to one thing you just said. Brown often uses statistics, as does Hillel, to support its position with regard to anti-Semitism. And one of them is that Brown has the highest percentage of Jewish students of any university in the Ivy League. In my post of a couple of days ago, or I guess yesterday, or I think it was 2 days ago, I noted at one point that I have real doubts about that number. The basic number comes from Hillel itself, and it is backed up by absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
And what's startling about that number is that it vastly exceeds the Jewish population of any other Ivy school. Cornell claims to have a slightly lower percentage, something along the lines of 21 or 22%. But the rest of the Ivy schools are in the 8, 9, 10% area. Now, there are various reasons why that is the case. One of them is that um, Jews are put into the category of white, non-Hispanic people when these statistics are compiled, which is in and of itself, to me, evidence of non-compliance with the Supreme Court's decisions with regard to outlawing racially based admissions. But unless there are an awfully high number of Black, Asian, Hispanic, Jews at Brown, that number is really open to doubt, and someone needs to take a hard look at it because that, in addition to the Jews are on our side too, using, for example, and in particular, Professor Omar Bartov, a far left Israeli professor and uh, genocide historian. Uh, that statistic and those facts are trotted out by Brown on every occasion.
Right. So, going back to the investigation for a second, right? Is it true that one of the goals was to assess the severity or level of anti-Semitism on campus? And then you're introducing this letter um, that was written by Hillel, Chabad, and other Jewish leaders that is basically saying, "Oh, it's all good. We're a welcoming space. We've, had so many people for Shabbat dinners, and we embrace." The free exchange of ideas. It's all good. Is that like a fair summary of what this letter is saying?
Yeah, that is a fair summary, and that's why I say that letter standing alone probably torpedoed the investigation. I mean, I've done a lot of investigations, as I noted, and if I were a government lawyer and I received this, it's called a statement. If I received this statement from Brown Jewish leadership, I would tell my superiors in the government on that investigation, it's over. I mean, forget it. There's no point in wasting any more time, money, or effort on
Right.
this investigation. If the leading Jewish organizations on campus say there's no problem here, there's no there. That's the position that they basically took. So in the end, there was a settlement of that investigation that was, as I have written many times at willisjgoldsmith.substack.com, utterly meaningless. They basically agreed to comply with the law. They paid a pittance in fines, $50 million over 10 years, not even to be paid to Jewish organizations, but to be paid to Rhode Island workforce organizations. It was a joke. It was a really good job by Brown's outside lawyers and their general counsel, but it is worthless when it
Wow.
when it comes to addressing issues of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for following these issues so closely, writing about them, sharing them with people because so many people aren't aware that this is happening at Brown. And I do think that some of the Jewish leadership is clearly getting in the way of actually addressing anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, and anti-Israel activities on campus. Like I know for a fact, even though the encampments don't exist anymore like they did in 2024, there are still frequently, for example, tabling events from PSL, which is the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They have a strong Rhode Island chapter. They're extremely anti-Israel. Their agitators continue to have a presence on Brown University's campus, hand out anti-Israel propaganda. I've even seen them hand out tote bags that says within our lifetime that has a red triangle. And for those who don't know, that red triangle has been really popular on social media since October 7th. And it's a way that Hamas and other terrorists identify a Jewish target. And so, again, these woke social justice warriors, when they see a pro Zionist or pro Israel person on social media, they'll comment with that red triangle, indicating that that person's a target. So I just think it's absolutely atrocious that Brown is letting this wreak havoc on campus. And again, being a community grassroots organization, we get to hear the voices of the students and the parents who are telling us the opposite as what is outlined in this letter. So we definitely have a problem with the Jewish leadership at Brown, and just the broader atmosphere that you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, and again, to be clear, I firmly believe in the First Amendment. I firmly believe in peaceful protest. I firmly believe in the right of all manner of people, however unfounded, untethered from reality and the facts their views and opinions are, uh, to do what they want to do. The problem at Brown is that it is a one-way street.
Yeah.
And there is nothing that is done by the administration. There is nothing that is done by the Center for Middle East Studies. I mean, calling it the Center for Middle East Studies is in itself a joke. You have the head of Judaic Studies at Brown, Paul Nami, who describes himself as an anti-Zionist. It is a one-way street. There's only one narrative that's permitted. There may be an opportunity with the new dean of the Watson Institute, who has said all the right things about the necessity of having a breadth of perspectives represented on campus. But that has never happened. Certainly not going to happen in the near future. John Spencer, an expert on the laws of war, who taught at West Point on urban warfare, is going to speak on March 10th. And Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, a gifted lawyer, whose connection with Israel, I'm not really aware of. But those two have been given as examples by Dean Friedman, of people who have spoken out on behalf of Israel, in addition to the fact that Einet Wilf, the former Israeli politician, spoke some time ago, and Bret Stephens wrote a column. But that's that's a tiny, tiny percentage of speakers, all outside speakers. So far as I know, there's no one on the faculty at Brown, and I'd love to be proven wrong on this, but there is no one on the faculty at Brown who has stood up and said, this is ridiculous. You've got to have more than one point of view perspective. That is, after all, the essence of a liberal education. The former head of the Judaic Studies Department at Brown, David Jacobson, did try, but that was given kind of the fast shuffle by the then temporary head of the Watson Center. And a person named Eli Rosenbaum was going to speak, and then he wasn't going to speak, and then there was a scheduling problem. I've forgotten all the precise details, but the net of it is that he was not invited to speak on campus. And let me just say a word about him, with full disclosure that he's a personal friend of mine and a person with whom I've worked. Eli gave up a very lucrative future in the private practice of law to devote 40 years to prosecuting war criminals, Nazis and other war criminals around the world. He was one of the lead prosecutors who prosecuted Kurt Waldheim and got him barred from the United States. Rosenbaum has forgotten more in the last 30 minutes about the laws of war and the meaning of genocide than anyone on the Brown faculty has ever known.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you really just encapsulated a lot of the issues going on at Brown. And I also want to just for 1 second contrast the Title IX investigation that happened at Brown with similar investigations that happened, for example, at Harvard University, where even though the outcome wasn't perfect, at least there were some actual consequences. Like there were certain people in their Center for Middle Eastern Studies departments that were fired from their position for saying, harmful statements, harmful ideology. And so I just felt like Brown got not even a slap on the wrist. It just more was like, okay, you passed. No anti-Semitism. You're good, and just continue doing what you're doing. So again, I just want to make that distinct comparison. And then I also wanted to zoom in on another specific example, and that was the Non-Zionist Academic Traditions Conference that was held last February 2025 at Brown University. This is something that my organization followed closely. And although nobody in RICI, right now is a Brown student, we couldn't go inside. They actually blocked us. We tried to register, but they wouldn't approve our registration. But we did have a colleague and friend of ours who's a research analyst at Camera, which is an organization that combats inaccurate representations about Israel in the media. One of their researchers attended the conference and gave us a summary of some of the harmful rhetoric that was shared by Professor Dumani and some of those other usual suspects that were in attendance. And one of the main things that stood out to me was saying that Zionism is fascism, Zionism is Nazism. That's literally what one of these professors in this conference said. And so, like you said, Willis, without balancing that with some type of pro-Israel speaker or conference, it becomes to be an echo chamber on campus. And so I also believe in free speech. So that's why we mobilized hundreds of people to send emails to all the Brown administrators asking them to allow a similar type conference, but more on a pro-Israel side to occur. And of course, it fell on deaf ears. So I'm curious what you have to say about that conference in particular.
Sure, but let me go back first to three things that you said. First of all, as to Harvard, you're correct. Harvard actually took steps that were proactive. The head of their Center for Middle East Studies, or whatever it was called, was fired. Also, Harvard cut, at least temporarily, maybe permanently, its ties to Birzeit University. Brown has refused to do so. That's number one. Number two, Brown has taken the position in recent conferences of CMES that there can be no recordings or no filming, no live streaming, etc. So much for freedom of speech and academic freedom. I don't know what they're hiding, but they're hiding something. Um, the third thing that you mentioned that I want to comment on very briefly is CAMERA, the Committee for Accuracy and Media Reporting and Analysis. CAMERA did four separate studies of what happened was happening at Brown that were published in late 2023 and early 2024. Those studies in excruciating detail, heavily footnoted, with the sourcing being beyond question, detailed anti-Semitism at Brown. And Brown never even acknowledged receipt of those studies, which were widely distributed. I should amend that slightly by saying when it was noted, I believe in the New York Post, that there were studies about Brown, and that article, whether it was in the New York Post or in some other publication, was brought to the attention of President Paxson. It was just blown off as essentially people who don't know what they're talking about, and that was it. It is, those three things are things that really people should know about. As to that conference, it was horrible. I think it involved 19 speakers, seven from Brown, 12 from around the country. In other words, they flew in either at the speaker's own expense, highly unlikely, or at Brown's expense, or at the Center for Middle East Studies expense. People from UCLA, currently the subject of a lawsuit, major lawsuit brought by the Brandeis Center, and other countries around, other campuses around the country, to speak on exactly what you said, that Zionism is colonialism, fascism, et cetera, and need not be any part of Judaism at all. In a letter that I wrote to Dean Friedman 7 or 8 days before my post went up a couple of days ago, I asked when was Brown going to have a 2-day conference of the sort that the Center for Middle East Studies had. By the way, many of the professors, if not the majority, and I have to go back and count, were Jews. There's always the same lineup of Brown Jewish professors: Omar Bartov, Adi Ofer, Ariel Azoulay, Katharina Galore. These people are always the poster children for the perspective of the Center for Middle East Studies, that even the Jews are on our side. So they were prominent in that conference. And in fact, they were prominent in a conference that was held, I believe, either last Sunday afternoon and yesterday, or yesterday, and may still be going on today, on anti-Zionism and on uh, their effort to, in effect, when I read the announcement of the conference, merge Brown's Judaic Studies Department, in effect, merge the Judaic Studies Department with the Center for Middle East Studies. It's an outrage. To me, the Judaic Studies Department as presently constituted shouldn't exist at Brown. And of course, I've said since I first learned of the Center for Middle East Studies that uh, entity has no place on the campus of any serious institution.
Wow, that is just so atrocious on so many levels. And I just want to explain this a little bit further for some folks that might not know what Judaic studies is. But literally, it's an interdisciplinary field that examines history, literature, religion, language, and culture of Jewish people from antiquity to present. So the fact that you're saying, the head of the Judaic studies department identifies as anti-Zionist is ridiculous, just so ridiculous. It's like saying, "Oh, I'm not against Japanese people, but I don't want Japan to exist. Japan is evil. They don't deserve to have, their own homeland." It just doesn't make any sense. You can't take Israel and Zionism out of Judaism, out of Judaic studies. And so when you have these people that identify as Jewish, right, speaking, many people could think, oh, well, they're representative of all Jews. They're saying that they're against Israel. It's just very harmful. And like you said, some students might be falling prey to this. Students that are taking these classes, coming to these conferences, whether they're Judaic studies students or taking classes from the Center for Middle East Studies. It's it's like so backwards that it just doesn't even make sense. It's almost comical.
Yeah, I mean it's true, and I would recommend that you send to your listeners Ellen Ginsberg Simon's post of, I think, last Sunday on this conference, because Ellen absolutely nails the absurdity of this conference, including, for example, one of the moderators of one of the panels being the current head of the Center for Middle East Studies. I mean, Dumani, who's the kind of puppeteer for all of this, has cleverly put himself in the background and pushed other people in front. Also, of course, Omar Bartov, who famously wrote an article 1 month or so after October 7th, saying that he suspected that Israel was about to engage in genocide. Um, uh, he is doubly dangerous, not just because he's Jewish, not just because he was actually in the IDF, not just because his father fought with the Jewish Brigade, but because he's a supposed genocide historian. And that gives him extra credibility. The New York Times loves him. All of the anti-Israel, anti-Zionist groups can't get enough of him. I think Ellen correctly described him in her podcast as the poster boy for all of these people. And as I mentioned, I think early on, he is never challenged. None of these people are ever challenged. They are never on a panel with people who have an opposing point of view. They are never even responded to in subsequent panels. Um, and that, I think, is the fault to some degree of the Jewish community. It's certainly the fault of Hillel and Chabad, who are ridiculous on this. and who are kind of cowering in the corner, afraid to open their mouths, and worse, just trying to curry favor with the Brown administration, which was plainly the purpose of the statement that you put up on the screen and that we referred to earlier. And that is just shameful, which is the way I described it in one of my posts.
Yes, I totally agree. And again, I just want to reiterate that Ricky has made several attempts to work with various Jewish leaders on campus, also directly with the Brown Students for Israel. I've offered to help bring them speakers, like encouraging them to take the lead, of course, in organizing it on their campus. And I keep getting the same response that they kind of have to run everything by Hillel, which is a problem in and of itself because student organizations are supposed to be independent. They're not, they're not required to run anything by any center on campus. They should be allowed to rent space and have their own event. But they kind of are almost controlled by Hillel, is what I've heard directly from these students. And so it just perpetuates this imbalance that we've talked about that exists on campus. Um,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I mean, Hillel and Chabad simply can't be trusted on this issue. In fairness, the statement, you can imagine the pressure that they were put on to sign the statement. The current chancellor of Brown, I'm looking at it now, two previous chancellors, both of whom were Jewish, the former chair of the Brown RISI Hillel, um, and of course, the Rabbi Bolton, the executive director of Brown RISI Hillel, Rabbi Mendel Laufer, the
Hmm.
director of Chabad on College Hill, and two students in the class of 26. There you have it. So I don't know whether the students wanted to sign it or not. I have no doubt, none whatsoever, that Rabbi Bolton couldn't get his signature on the document fast enough. I don't know enough about Rabbi Laufer to know why he signed it. Although I will say that I got a fairly funny response to my one of my posts about this letter when one of the comments was, and I think I remember this exactly correct. Oi, Mendel Laufer signed this letter? Question mark. Close quotes. Uh,
Wow.
so and but the Brown Students for Israel, you can understand it. I mean, they are under intense pressure. Hillel doesn't want to have anything to do with anybody who will stand up for Israel. And by the way, criticizing the Netanyahu government, perfectly fine. I'm not a huge fan of the Netanyahu government. I'm not a huge fan of the Israeli right. No problem at all. That is academic freedom. That is freedom of speech.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
that's not what this is all about. This is all about denying Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, and that's something that Hillel and Chabad are enabling on the Brown campus. They I hesitate to use the word, but they are in effect collaborating with the Center for Middle East Study on this.
Right. Right. And I also want to point out that while all of this is going on, Qatar and other foreign entities are also investing, millions of dollars. I think I saw a number of $20 billion across American universities.
All right.
So there is clearly also foreign actors, foreign influence. And so I wonder if that has come up at all in any of your research, if you can talk about that.
Brown has been really kind of at the bottom of that list. I mean, Brown has received funds from foreign entities, but not in the number of dollars that other universities have, like Cornell, like Harvard, for example, or Yale. Um, but for example, the Darwish chair that Dumani holds was funded in part by the Palestinian Authority. This is according to I think it's called Go Local
Oh
Prov,
yes, yep.
Prov Go Local or something like that, a local Providence. uh, outlet. I think they gave a number as $11 million, dollars, uh, not all to the Darwish chair. Darwish, you should know, was a kind of a legendary quote Palestinian unquote poet who was a virulent anti-Semite, as I've noted from some of his comments in my posts. So there is shadowy funding that goes on, certainly with respect to the Darwish chair. There's a foundation. I think it's called the Safri Foundation. I'm not sure. It's a name something like that of
Mhm.
an anti-Zionist in Israel, a very rich guy, I think in the construction business. But um, uh, that's what Brown has allowed to have happen. I mean, I guess to its credit, it hasn't had its hands in Qatar's pockets, at least not yet. But who knows what will happen tomorrow?
Right. Right. Yeah, thank you again for following this issue so closely. I guess I want to ask you if there's anything else that you'd like to share about Brown. You've done a tremendous job. And also, where can people read your stuff? How do they find you?
Well, okay, thank you. It's of course been my pleasure to do this. I would say several things. First of all, my stuff is at willisjgoldsmith.substack.com. It's free. I'm not, looking uh, to make money on this. In fact, I wish I really weren't doing it, to be honest. This is not a fun undertaking for me. I feel that I have an obligation to do that. Second, I do wish that Jewish organizations were more outspoken on this. It is beginning to happen now, but it has taken years and years and years. In fact, when Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL, which has not been particularly outspoken until recently on this, spoke at Brown a couple of years ago, Elias Muhana, who's the current head of the Brown Center for Middle East Studies, expressed some concern about the fact that Greenblatt was going to speak at Brown, although he did wind up speaking and giving a fairly anodyne presentation, as I recall. So I think it is important for Jews to stand up and be counted. I mean, we've seen this movie before. And I noted that, I got an email today from someone, saying that a couple of Stanford students were threatened with another Holocaust. I mean, Jews really do have to stand up for themselves. Um, okay, Hillel won't, Chabad won't, fine. But that doesn't mean that others can't.
Right, exactly. And again, thank you for your work. I also, of course, need to just plug Ricky for a second, encourage people to get involved. And I'm putting on the screen here. So the last two graduations or commencements, uh, our organization, Ricky, partnered with a group of Brown alumni who are pro-Israel to fly overhead in the sky during graduation, this aerial banner that you can see. It has the Israeli flag, American flag, and it says Brown for Israel. And this was our way of collectively making a statement that we do support Israel and we're also supporting our Jewish students. And I can't tell you how many students and families came up to us during commencement the last 2 years and thanked us for doing this because we also had a peaceful on the ground presence where we were silently holding our Israeli and American flags. We were not disturbing the graduation like the pro-Hamasniks on the other side were doing. They were chanting and disturbing the ceremony while President Paxson was speaking and other speakers, and the police did nothing to stop them. But we were just silently there supporting our Jewish students and allies. And that's the kind of difference that we can make on the ground. We need to stand up. We can't be shy or skirting away from our Jewish identities. We should embrace them and be strong together. So please join us for commencement again this year. Reach out to me at Maria at ricoalitionforisrael.org. Check out our website, ricoalitionforisrael.org, and on social media, Facebook, X and Instagram. We are at RI4Israel. That's the number 4 to stay up to date with us and get involved because we can't just rely on some of these bigger institutions to, defend us. I think it's up to us as communities to do a lot of this work, unfortunately. So, thank you so much, Willis, for your work on this. I'm sure it's also exhausting for you. And like you said, it's not something you want to do. You don't want to read all day about how your alma mater has so much, unchecked Jew hatred and anti-Zionism on campus. But you're doing a great service for the community. And I hope that more people will read your Substack after listening to this podcast and really be more critical of what Brown is doing.
Well, thanks very much, Maria. It was a pleasure, I guess, to be with you on this. But as I said, Brown was very important in my life, and I don't really enjoy this, but someone has to stand up and speak out.
Thank you so much for your work, and thanks again for your time, Willis.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, we'll see everybody on the next deep dive. I'm Israel High.